have all members present tonight except for Councillor Rich. We've reached 6:30, so you may begin the meeting.
Thank you, Linda. Then we'll call to order this Town of Saugeen Shores Council planning meeting. And the second item on the agenda is additions, deletions, amendments. We don't have any of those. Third item is disclosures of pecuniary interest. Does anyone have one of those they'd like to declare at this time? Seeing none, of course, you can do that anytime if you need to. It doesn't look like we have any minutes to adopt, so that moves us on then to public meetings. And there are 4 public meetings on this evening. And before I call the first one, I'll just explain how they're going to work. We'll begin with a presentation by the planner, following which we will open the public meeting and begin by hearing from the applicant or their designate. Afterwards, we'll hear from any members of the public who are with us who wish to speak to the application. Once we've heard from the members of the public, we will turn it over to members of the committee to give us questions for clarification or comments. So that's how it will go for this evening. And with that, we'll start our first public meeting. And that is Z 2020-069 Ernest Properties Incorporated on Saugeen Street. And we'll turn it over to the planner. I believe it's Ms. Mugabe.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Charbonneau. If you could just get a few seconds to share my screen.
Sure.
Okay, can you see my screen?
Yep, we can see it.
Yes, okay, thank you. The application before committee is a zoning bylaw amendment application. The purpose of this public meeting is to present the proposal to the committee and to obtain feedback from members of the public. It is intended that staff will return at a future date with a recommendation report, which will address comments arising from tonight's meeting. The site is a vacant lot with an existing driveway. It is my understanding that there was a shed or a garage on the northwest corner of the site between 2005 and 2014. The immediate vicinity is characterized by the Saugeen River to the north and residential uses to the south, east, and west. The area is serviced by municipal water and sewers. Saugeen Street is a year-round municipal road. The applicant wishes to construct 4 bungalow townhouses with front porches and decks at the rear of the units. 2 parking spaces will be provided per unit, 1 garage space and 1 driveway space. A wooden fence is proposed along the southerly, easterly, and westerly boundaries. The owner will retain ownership of the townhouses for the long term and will be leasing the units. However, he is also proposing at this time to sever the subject lands into 4 individual parcels, including the retained parcel. The intent is that in the future, there will be the option to sell the units individually. The purpose of the zoning bylaw amendment is to rezone the subject lands from residential first density R1 to residential fourth density special holding R4-20-H. It is intended that the holding provision will be lifted from the zoning once the site plan approval has been granted. Relief is requested to reduce the lot area from 250 square meters to 211.44 square meters for lot 2 and 215.17 square meters for lot 3. Relief is also required to reduce the interior side yard setback from 3 meters to 1.2 meters for lot number 4. Relief is also requested to reduce the rear yard depth from 7.5 meters to 6.1 meters for lot 1. The maximum permitted lot coverage is 35%. Relief is required to exceed that maximum to 45.58% for lot 1, to 57.1% for lot 2, to 59.4% for lot 3, and to 49.77% for lot 4. I will speak very briefly to the policies that apply, starting with the provincial policy statement. The site is within the settlement area of Southampton. Based on the provincial policy statement, settlement areas shall be the focus of growth. Development taking place in designated growth areas should occur adjacent to the existing built-up area and should have compact form, mix of uses and densities that allow for the efficient use of land, infrastructure, and public service facilities. Appropriate development standards should be promoted which facilitate intensification, redevelopment, and compact form. The proposal is consistent with the provincial policy statement. The Bruce County Official Plan. The site is designated primary urban communities. The proposed development represents an infill and intensification opportunity on an underutilized parcel of land within a built-up area. Each townhouse will have frontage on a year-round municipal road and has access to full municipal services. The proposed development does not require significant extension of municipal services as they already exist along Saugeen Street. Services only need to be extended into the newly created units. The subject lands are designated residential in the Saugeen Shores Official Plan, and a sliver within the site's northeast corner is designated environmental hazard. No buildings will be erected within the hazard land area. Permitted uses in the residential designation include a range of residential dwelling types at various densities. The proposed townhouse development is a permitted use on the site. Alternative development standards may be implemented to reduce housing costs and to achieve urban design objectives. And as I've already mentioned, the applicant is seeking relief from certain provisions to facilitate the proposed development. The reduced development standards proposed for the site will reduce the cost of development on a per-unit basis. In terms of density and compatibility, the maximum permitted density is 40 units per gross hectare. The proposed townhouse development has a density of 30.78 units per gross hectare and is therefore within the range permitted. The size and scale of the townhouse development is compatible with the detached dwellings in the neighborhood. The term compatibility does not necessarily mean the same as, rather it means to be able to coexist without causing significant problems in terms of massing of buildings, noise, traffic, etc. From a cultural heritage perspective, the Stage 2 assessment found no archaeological materials or features on the site. The recommendation is that no further archaeological assessment is required for the subject lands. The lands are presently zoned residential first density R1, and a townhouse dwelling is not a permitted use. Hence, the subject application to change the zone to permit the development. Related files that accompany the subject application are consent application file numbers B104 through to 106. The applicant submitted a planning report prepared by Ron Davidson, land use planning consultant, and as well an archaeological assessment prepared by Janusas Archaeology. The town of Saugeen Shores has submitted comments. The application appears to conform to the town's official plan. They have indicated that the plan encourages infill and intensification within the built-up area. The development is subject to site plan control. They've indicated that matters dealing with building facades, landscaping, as well as engineering works will be addressed through the site plan process. It is possible the site plan as shown may be different than what is eventually developed on the site as part of the site plan process. The applicant is advised that the town's requirement for sanitary services is 125 millimeters. The proponent will also be responsible to provide the appropriate services to the development, either as a condition of consent approval or through the site planning process. If the severances are approved, the town will seek 5% cash in lieu of parkland dedication. The Conservation Authority finds the application acceptable. The proposed development is located outside the erosion hazard. They have indicated that an environmental impact study to address lands adjacent to fish habitat is not required for this development, provided effective sediment and erosion control measures are used and maintained. during and after construction, that the proposal should have no impact on fish habitat. The historic Saugeen Métis requested and were provided with a copy of the archaeological assessment, and they sought clarification on the proposed severance. We provided them with the information they required in order to complete their review of the applications. There was quite some interest in the proposal from members of the public. A resident objects to the 67% lot coverage, and that's the lot coverage that's indicated on the application. I note that the site plan has since been revised. The maximum lot coverage is for the individual parcels of 45.58% for lot 1, 57.1% for lot 2, 59.4% for lot 3, and 49.77% for lot 4. The zoning bylaw requires a maximum lot coverage of 35%. Lot coverage for the site is 52.28% if the decks are included. And if the decks are not factored into the calculation, the lot coverage for the overall site is less than 50%. Issues have been raised around drainage and stormwater management. I note that these will be dealt with at the site plan approval stage. A resident sought clarification on whether the development includes decks and porches. She explained that she did not receive any notification of the proposal. She stated that the notification time period is not long enough for residents to provide comments. I note that there are front porches and decks at the rear of the units. The resident has been provided with a copy of the public notice, and the Planning Act notification timeframe has been met for this application. A neighbor objects to a multi-unit development behind their property due to noise. They've indicated that one family is now 4 families, that there will be less privacy, that the 2-story buildings will impact sunlight on neighboring properties. I note that the houses will be bungalows. They will have a height of one story to 1.5 stories. That matters relating to buffers will be dealt with at the site plan approval stage. There's objection to the development on grounds that the rental units will lower the neighboring homes' resale values. The Planning Act does not specifically deal with property values, only land use planning matters. As a summary to recap, this zoning bylaw amendment is requested to rezone the subject lands from residential 1 R1 to residential 4th density special holding R4-20-H. The zoning bylaw amendment will facilitate the construction of 4 bungalow townhouses on the subject lands. It is staff's recommendation that zoning bylaw amendment application Z69 be received as information. And that concludes my presentation.
Okay, thank you, Barbara. Does the applicant wish to speak to the application or a representative of the applicant?
Yes, good evening, Mr. Mayor. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Ron Davidson, and I'm a planning consultant, and I helped Mr. Ernest with his application. He filed it. I wrote the planning report. He's on the line as well, and I think he's got a couple of things to say when I'm done. I guarantee you I will be brief. Hopefully, though, we're given a chance to respond to questions later on. So as you heard from Barbara, Dustin is proposing a 4-unit townhouse development, and he plans to build the units and then rent them out. And they will be designed for seniors, and not that we can, through zoning matters or site plan agreements, control who actually lives in these. Not that we would want to do that, because everybody needs a place to live, but Dustin has its designed for seniors, and they will be rented to seniors. They'll be, as you heard, they'll be 1 story in height, and they'll have a loft, and usually people call that a 1.5 story building. The town's official plan is very clear in encouraging medium density development, and it's very clear in promoting rental housing. As all of council is well aware, rental housing is in need in Saugeen Shores. In terms of compatibility, Barbara touched on this. You'll hear planners say all the time that compatibility does not mean the same as. It means being able to put two land uses side by side and having them coexist without creating problems, such as one having a major dominating effect over the other, or creating noise problems amongst the uses, or traffic problems. And that simply won't happen with these low-rise townhouses. So not only does this conform with the official plan, but this type of development is exactly what the official plan is looking for. I'm not saying it's looking for all townhouses, that's not my point, but it's strongly encouraged, especially rental. And it's also consistent with the provincial policy statement. And the provincial policy statement, I'm not going to get into that too much, other than to make one statement. The PPS recognizes that relief or reduced development standards may be needed in order to achieve an efficient use of serviced urban land. And that's what's being requested here. Yeah, relief from the zoning bylaw is required to make this specific development work. I've gone into quite a bit of detail in my planning report in providing justification for each of the items that we're requesting relief from. And I won't get into this, but I would like to say two things and then I'll be done talking. The units that are proposed for the site are of a very modest size. The proposal does not represent a scenario where large homes are being squeezed onto small lots. That's not the case here. The ground floor of the 4 units range from about 110 square meters to about 120 square meters, which isn't large. And these figures actually include the footprint of the attached garage. And then the other thing I'll say is, because they're intended for seniors, the units, of course, as I said, will be bungalows with a guest bedroom in the loft. So that means you don't have the option of a smaller lot coverage. If you're putting all of your living space and your garage, obviously your garage on one floor, that means you have to build out and not up. And yes, that does increase the lot coverage. A big thing you want to be concerned with, of course, as the one neighbor said, is in fact lot grading and drainage or stormwater management. We have an engineer drawing done. And before, if this gets approved, before the developer can actually build, he will need to enter into a site plan agreement with the town. And the town and the Conservation Authority will have to be 100% satisfied that the development is addressing or has addressed stormwater management in an appropriate manner. So that will be addressed. That's it for my presentation, Your Worship and members of council, but I know Dustin would like to say just a few words.
Sure.
Yeah, thanks, Ron. And good evening, everyone. My name is Dustin. A little bit about myself. I live and work in the area, and I've been building my rental property business since 2014. My intentions are to grow and expand with more rental properties within Saugeen Shores. This lot in question, I've owned this for a few years now, and I've listened to the needs of Saugeen Shores, and I put a lot of thought into what to build here. Our area is lacking in rentals geared towards seniors, which is main floor living, 1-bedroom units. And this will be an excellent addition to the rental market geared towards the 55+ living. I'm proposing a 4-unit townhouse to be built and used as a long-term rental property. I currently have 3 retired couples who are wanting to rent these units long-term. So this will be a 1-story, low-profile building, and the loft is actually just in the attic space. So we're not building up to bring that dormer out. So it still is a 1-story building. The exterior will be the designer's stone. There'll be decks off the back that are approximately 1 foot off the ground. The height of the building will be less than the maximum height restrictions in our building code. Like I said, the loft's at the front of the building. It'll provide about a 600 square foot room with a view of the river. And these are 1-bedroom units with single garages, and they'll be parking for 2 vehicles in each driveway plus the garage space. Along the south of the property, the rear of the property, there'll be a full privacy fence. So I'm here to answer any questions that you have, and thank you.
Okay, thank you. Well, if that's all we have from the applicant, then we'll open the floor to members of the public. We have, well, I guess 4 members of the public, 3 separate speakers, because 2 are going to speak together. And so the first Folks who we're going to hear from are Marjorie Dorzik and Michael Sebastian. And can we bring them in and hear what they have to say?
It over to you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for allowing me to speak. My name is Michael. I'm sorry, I got volume going all over the place here.
Marjorie,
Yes?
would it be possible for you to turn the volume off on your cell phone? Like just down.
I'm doing that right now.
Okay, thanks.
Hi, I'm sorry. I've been having technical difficulty with the video and the phone.
Yeah, no problem.
Thank you for allowing me to speak to you today. My name is Marjorie Dorset, and my husband's name is Michael Sebastian. We own the adjoining rear lot property to the developer's lot. We would like to thank you for allowing us to speak at this meeting. Sorry, the sound keeps bouncing. We would like to thank you for allowing us to speak at this meeting. The current proposal by the developer has direct impact to our lot. In the proposed design, 2.25 units of the 4 townhouses will be situated against our backyard. We have the following points we would like to make in regards to the proposal. We would like clarification on the actual total lot coverage for this proposed townhouse project. Our written input to this development on April the 26th is based on a 67% lot coverage, which shows up several times on the developer's documentation. In the current presentation by the county online, it indicates a 59% lot coverage. And if you do the math from the developer's chart, page 5, it has a lot coverage of 52.8%. These points were brought up to Barbara on Friday because I am concerned about what the lot coverage is. The developer is requesting a change to the land designation from R1 to R4. The lot coverage for this type of property is 35%. Confirmation on what the total lot coverage by the developer needs to be known. An R1 lot only allowed a 40% lot coverage. From what I have researched into, an allowance of up to 5% over the coverage is allowed under exceptions, bringing lot coverage on an R1 lot to 45%. If an R1 development applicant is held at an acceptable tolerance of 5% above the 40%, then the same type of tolerance should be applied to an R4 application. Side yard setbacks for R1 to R4 on a bungalow indicates that from the property line to the actual gutter on the house, there shall be 3 feet. The side yard special exemption setback of 1.2 meters will most likely fall short of this, since this is from the lot line to the wall of the building. Point number 2. The developer is proposing rental units, and it has been indicated in the planning report presented today on page 6 and 8 of affordable housing needed in the official plan. This is a need for our community. However, I don't believe these rental units will be low-income subsidized units. The developer will be charging fair market value for the rental of these units, and eventually be selling each unit for profit, which is why he is requesting the subdividing of the 1 lot into 4 lots. Frontage of each lot will be 25 feet by 100 feet deep. On page 4 of the planning report, it indicates, quote from the report, the land owner will retain ownership of the townhouse for the long term and will be leasing the unit. However, he is also proposing this time to sever the lands into 4 parcels, including the retained parcel. In the future, there will be options to sell these units individually. We are building our retirement home on our lot. 2 1/4 townhouse units will be directly on our backyard. This will increase noise, smells from barbecues, dog noise, etc. This will have direct impact on our lot and neighboring lots. On page 7 of the earnest presentation presented today, it speaks to the following. Matter relating to buffers will be dealt with at site plan approval stage, and object to development on grounds that rental units will lower neighboring home sales values. The Planning Act does not deal specifically with property values, only land use matters. But the Building Code and Planning Act do speak to both of these matters. The lot coverage and setbacks are a mechanism to protect adjoining property owners and their rights. These guidelines are needed so that development on a piece of property does not negatively affect the neighboring lots. They are not to be used to squeeze a development onto a property that is too small to support the developer's request. Approval of excessive lot coverage should not be allowed. The lot coverage is 35%. We need to know what the total lot coverage is for this building. In closing, my husband and I have thought many times how nice it would be to have an affordable community for all who are in need of subsidized rental/housing. People looking for a safe place to live on a limited income. These units are being built for fair market income, which will be above lower income residents' needs. Where these units are being built and how they are being built should adhere to the proper setbacks and lot coverage tolerances allowed by the PILE. For there must be a reason that every town and community has these guidelines and lot coverage tolerances. The developer behind us is trying to squeeze in instead of adhering to proper town building guidelines. The developer has his own reasons for excessively wanting to stretch these guidelines. Basically, I'm sorry, profit. We have thought about how we could be fair to the developer, the neighborhood, and the town. Why not meet halfway? We would be open to an R1 lot to be subdivided into 2 properties with the construction of 2 single-family homes being built there, adhering to the proper town guidelines for building. We're looking forward to living in harmony with our neighbors and Saugeen Shores and offering our help to make it a better place to live in. Thank you for allowing me to speak today.
Thank you, Ms. Dorzik. Okay, so that's the first pair of folks who want to speak to us. The second is from Ken Russell and Ted Russell, who I understand are going to speak to us together. Are the Russells there? I see both of them there, actually, so maybe they'll speak one at a time. Ted, Ken, are you there?
Shift Command A.
Hello there, we're hearing you. Are you ready to speak to council? Mr. Russell?
Hello?
Hello.
Hello, yes, this is Ted Russell.
Hello, Ted, the floor is yours.
Oh, okay. I wasn't sure if my father Ken was going to go first.
Sure. Oh, well, you're up first.
Am I? Okay.
Looks like it.
Okay. Thank you very much,
No problem.
Mr. Mayor.
Sure.
So I'm a relative son. I'm the son of Ken Russell, who lives immediately next door to the property. I personally I'm involved in construction and planning, but I'm in the city of Kitchener, but I'm fairly well versed with the Saugeen area. My comment, I've gone through the planning and I've taken a look at the building design and whatnot, the lot coverage. I echo a lot of the comments of the previous person that was just speaking about the lot coverage being way too excessive for the area. I think something closer to the 35% would be more acceptable in that area. And I'm also a little bit confused if I've been hearing a lot of talk about it being a long-term rental building. However, with the severances that will be happening, the 3 townhouse, like a townhouse block can be built as rentals and not have to be severed. It can be kept as a single unit. This just allows the developer to be able to sell it off for profit later. So it's kind of contradictory on one hand that they say they want it as a long-term rental, but on the other hand, they're doing severance into individual units. So that's basically what my concerns are. My father and my mom, Ken and Lynn Russell, I'm sure they're going to come on now. Thank you.
Sure, okay, I see Ken there. So the floor is yours, sir.
Well,
Speak up, my
yeah.
dear.
well, the 3 units would be probably better, but wouldn't be crowding quite so much onto that piece of property. But anyway,
It needs to be developed.
it definitely needs to be developed, and the rental units are definitely a good idea. Maybe this rental specific type of development would be more in order rather than having them individual, they owned, like my son was saying, that down the road they could be sold off individually.
Okay.
Yep, that's all.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much for your comments. I did. It occurred to me, and I apologize. I moved on to the Russells, and I know there was a question, at least one question, in Ms. Dorzik's presentation about the lot coverage of the building. I just wondered if either the planner or the applicant wanted to address that before we lose track of that question. Let me speak to that.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. So the lot coverage, the calculation is at 52.28% if you factor in the decks. Without the decks, then it's below 50%. I just also want to note that the existing provisions were developed in the 1990s and were not specifically designed with townhouses in mind. In contrast, Kincardine zoning bylaw contains provisions for each dwelling type in the R3 zone, and it allows for 60% lot coverage for townhouses. So I just wanted to put that out there. But
Okay.
certainly, I will confirm with the lot coverage and report back to council in a subsequent staff report.
Okay, good enough. That hopefully that answers Ms. Dorzik's question. Okay, so that then moves us on to our final member of the public who is asked to speak this evening, and that is Stan Bragg. Mr. Bragg.
Hello.
Hello, the floor is yours, sir.
The floor is mine. Yes. I'm Stan Bragg, at 221 Saugeen Street. I'm on one side and Mr. Russell's on the other side of the proposed building lot. It's the new house right on the corner by the bridge there. And Dustin and I have collaborated on a couple of things in getting hydro to my site into his proposed building site in the past. I don't want to prevent, things from moving forward, but I would echo some of the concerns that I would look at 3 units instead of 4. It's not using up the space of the property that 4 units is using. And one more thought, would be that how does a townhouse complex affect the property value of the single dwelling homes like mine and others on the street and in the block? That would be my concern. That's it.
Okay, all right, thank you very much. Now, I believe that that is the last member of the public who wanted to speak to us on this. Am I right about that, Barbara? Are there any other members of the public at all, just so I'm certain? Hello, Linda?
Mr. Mayor, there is no other members of the public.
Okay, very good. So that brings us to the end of our public portion of the meeting, and we'll now turn it over to members of the committee for questions of clarification. Committee, Councilor Schreier.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor, maybe just a clarification, and Barbara did mention a couple of percentages, but I just want to make sure that I have it right. On page 5 or 6 in the report, the chart, I think it's page 5, the chart that has the zoning provision and the proposed and then each lot broken out. That was very, very helpful, and I appreciate the planners providing that. In that chart, they have them broken out by each lot, but the combined maximum lot coverage is 58%, including the deck. Is that accurate to say?
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, the combined, the overall site lot coverage is 52.28% with the decks.
Okay, so 52.8% with the decks overall, and then broken down, we have the division, and they run from a range from 45.58 to 59.47. What is the benefit, or what is the, I guess my question is that it's stated in the report that there is an application for severance with the county right now, so that is not approved yet. Is how should we be considering this? And I know this is just for information tonight, but we're being presented with it as 4 individual lots, but do we know that that actually will happen, and should we be looking at it as a singular, I guess is my question.
Mm-hmm. If I may defer to the applicant's consultant, Mr. Mayor.
Sure. I mean, I guess maybe I could take a stab at it. I think that what council's considering, council will be considering, what we're considering in front of this public meeting this evening is a rezoning of the entire property to R4. It really isn't entirely relevant to that discussion, what will be built. What is relevant is whether that zoning is appropriate in this particular location, and all of the things that are potentially that you could build in an R4 zone. Once you've rezoned it, any of the things that are allowable in an R4 zone could eventually end up there. So I think that's the question in front of us. I think the building, what will be built or what may be built is the next question, which will have to be considered through a consent process and other and a site plan process and all of those things. So I think that will be the question before council when this comes back. I don't know, are there others who want to speak to that question or provide more clarity? Is that good enough, Councilor Schreiber?
Thank you for that. I think so for now. I think I just have to wrap my head around that, is that I'm not sure on the if it does matter or if it doesn't matter what's being built, because I think that some of the concerns that are articulated tonight has to do with what is actually being proposed to be built. So that would be a factor, I believe, anyway. But I think I was just looking for the difference between when we're looking at it as 4 individual lots or one lot itself.
Yeah. Well, what you're considering is rezoning the entire lot.
Yeah.
Jay, did you have a comment? Come on, man.
Well, I just want to explore this, if I may be permitted, to make sure that we give you the advice that we need to give you at the next meeting is that if you can revise the zoning bylaw to be as restrictive as you think you need to be, so that when the county is in the position of making a decision on the lot, they have a framework where they understand the area municipalities zoning bylaw and how it might affect the development. So building some flexibility into that would allow the county to examine some options when it comes to land division. Being so restrictive on the zoning, where we've outlined the maximum lot areas for each lot, for example, in old days, we might have just said 53%, and gave maximum flexibility to the land division. In this case, the applicant's trying to be explicit and with enough information for the county to guide their decision, so that when a lot is created, they know that's the envelope. And I hope I'm shaping this the way that makes sense to you, because when the county comes back with a recommendation, we want to be able to understand council's concerns and comments. And maybe Dan has further comments. I don't want to overcomplicate it, Mr. Mayor, but those are my thoughts.
Dan, you have something?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. I don't want to overcomplicate it either. It is a question about tenure, really. The local official plan does have goals for rental housing, but in terms of the zoning that's before us tonight, we're less concerned about the tenure type, or how the person living in there is going to be paying for it, either through a mortgage or a rent. So that's it's not irrelevant, but it's not a primary concern with the zoning, as the mayor indicated. We're looking at more the function of the site through the zoning than tenure.
Sure. Okay. The deputy mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, a couple questions. Dustin, will there be any privacy fencing between each unit up on Gray Street with all the townhouses there? They have a 6-8 foot privacy fence just to give a little privacy between the units. Will you be putting that on your units?
Yeah, I haven't given that too much thought, but I definitely understand where you're coming from, and that's no issue adding that, because yeah, especially for renting.
Yeah, that's something I'd like to see you put in there. Just it gives the renters or the people in the building just a little bit of privacy. You don't want to go out and you're looking left, right, and the people are right there. Just a 6-8 foot privacy fence would be good. Jay, correct me if I'm wrong, but the owner could take the land and subdivide it, split it into two, and then on each of those they could put a townhouse, correct? A duplex, correct?
Well, it depends on whether it meets a lot area or otherwise, but yes, they could. I suppose they could sever it, and they'd have two separate structures as duplexes with units. They'd have a different built form, but that is an option.
So that could happen as well. I like to. I'm not a jam it in, but I do like the idea. I like that the owner, Dustin, has said that he wants to try and target our senior population to give them something. It's not council's job to decide what he charges. That's not up to us. The fact that he's targeting the senior population, he's trying to get them some places, I like. My only concern on that street is snowplow. When the plow comes down there, the plow only goes one way. And the driveway, there's not a lot of space. How do we plan to manage the snow removal from those properties, especially for the middle two units? That's probably not a concern of ours either, but that's just a problem that I do see. If they go to push it across the road, that then pushes sometimes polluted. It could have gas or oil, snow onto the ravine, which then dumps directly down into the Saugeen River. I just worry about snow removal in that area because it's such a tight space. I think
there are matters we can look at site plan to, with the fencing, the how snow gets removed in the area. I think if you get past the zoning stage and we end up heading toward approving a site plan, those are matters we can look at then.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Dustin. At this point, I understand all the comments and concerns, but I do think it is a good project to move forward.
Okay, great. Thank you, Councilor Grace.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Barbara, for your report, and to all of the speakers tonight. I've got several questions, if I may.
Yep.
R3 and R4 zones both permit apartment buildings. Is that correct, Barbara?
That is correct, yes.
So one of my concerns is the height restriction. The developer has indicated that this will be a bungalow, 1 to 1.5 stories. What is your thought about the, I guess this would be for Mr. Ernest or Mr. Davidson. What is your thought about what the maximum height would be?
Yeah, so the maximum height, to put in perspective, the eaves trough would be about 10 to 12 feet off the ground, somewhere in there. And then the ridge height would be approximately 22 to 24 feet in height. So that's the very top. So to put that into perspective of the houses that are currently there, it would be approximately the same height as the house to the east and less than the one to the west, and as well as the two houses on Albert Street that are somewhat in the backyard, the older brick houses. Hopefully that answers your question.
Okay, thank you. So my next question for Barbara, I think somewhere in your report you talked about being able to indicate the maximum height as a condition of approval, but I didn't see that in the draft bylaw. Is that something that can be added?
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, we can amend or revise the draft amending bylaw to stipulate that the maximum height will be such and such. And I've just been talking with Mr. Posner, and he indicated a maximum height of 8 meters. So
Okay.
that's what we'll incorporate into the amending bylaw.
Okay, I think is the limit 9 meters, or is it 8 meters in Southampton? I
Well,
know
for the R3 and R4 zone, the maximum height is 12 meters. So taking into consideration your concern about the bungalow becoming a 2-story house dwelling, that could limit it to 8 meters maximum height.
Okay, thank you. Another question I have is about accessibility features, and I know that Mr. Ernest, you indicated that you were hoping or you intending to design these homes with specific accessibility features. I know that the building code minimum is somewhat different from what might be ideal, but and also that this is something that would be dealt with specifically in the site control process. But I would hope that you'd give some consideration to features like door widths to allow for wheelchairs or walkers, or lower light switches and maybe higher wall sockets, things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. If I can speak to that a little bit. Yeah, so I've given that quite a bit of thought. You mentioned it, door widths. All the doors will be the max size doors I can get, 36-inch doors. There will likely be one step up into these units, and I want to keep it at that. Inside the units, it's all main floor living, so the laundry will be on the main floor, bathroom and main bedroom on the main floor. So I've taken that into account, and I agree with what you're saying, Cheryl. Incorporate as much as I can into that.
Yeah, okay, thank you. I appreciate that. I think that is those are my questions for tonight. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Further questions from members? Vice Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I just want to verify through Jay, perhaps. Jay, in R1 residential height restriction, something leads me to believe that's 33 feet. Would that be correct, Jay? I'm in feet right now, but I know I should be in meters, but is that 33 feet, Jay, R1 residential maximum height restriction?
Yeah, the 10 meters is converted to about 33 feet. And the eight
Yeah.
meters is in the bylaw though. So there's a provision in Southampton for areas west of Grosvenor to not be in excess of 8 meters, which is why
Right.
it's sort of being discussed.
One of the concerns, from I've lost my place in my notes here. Sorry. It's the Doors Act. Did I pronounce that name correctly? If she's still in the call or not, but she talked about sunlight, and I guess I was looking at R1 hypothetically, and we can't deal with hypotheticals in planning, I know, but if two single-family dwellings were built in there to 33 feet high, I'm assuming it's the sun rising from the east. There's concern about the height, but I guess if we built two R1 residential units in their single-family dwelling, potentially they could be 33 feet high. And did I hear you correctly by saying these would be a maximum of 26 feet, correct? So they, is that correct? 26 feet maximum if we had the 8 meters placed in the bylaw?
Well, if that's a question to me, the height is measured to a different, it's not to the peak of the roof, it's to from the average finished grade to the average height between the eaves and the top of the roof line, if it's peaked roof. Now, a lot of this detail, you put the standard in the bylaw, and then through site planning, we confirm that to ensure they're compliant.
But where, Jay, you mentioned R3 is maximum 39.7 feet. So we're looking at around 8 meters, 26 feet, compared to R1 residential, if there are 2 units, 33 feet. So the height, sunlight, I'm just wondering if it could be, I guess it could be worse than what we're talking here with these units. The backyard, Ms. Dorzak mentioned about these units back onto her backyard. What's the rear yard setback again from her property line?
It's 7.5 meters is the rear yard setback.
Would that be from her lot line to the deck or her lot line to the house?
That would be to the deck.
So 7.1 meters?
7.5.
7.5 meters? So 25, 30 feet roughly. Okay.
Is that Barbara? I'm just looking at the chart in your report. Minimum rear yard site setback. That's the R4 zone requirement, but each of the separate lots has a different rear yard setback, right? One of them is as short as 6.01 meters. Can you can you just clarify that, Barbara, in response to the Vice Deputy Mayor?
Yes, so lot number 1 has a rear yard setback of 6.01 meters.
Okay.
So I think that, like the Vice Deputy Mayor was asking, what, in terms of Mrs. Dorzak's property, what would the setback be from her property line where her house is?
That was my question, yeah.
Okay. Can we look into that and get back to council in the next report, please?
Yeah, sure you can.
I'm looking at the sheet right now, and it's 7.96 meters for one of the units. That would be lot 4. Lot 3 is 7.91 meters.
Okay.
Directly behind the lot.
So around 25 to 30 feet. I'm going to feet, but just, I know meters is the right way to say it, but okay. Ron, see you to Ron Davidson, perhaps. You call these bungalows, can they be termed as bungalofts? I guess, what's the square footage on the bottom floor proposed for the bungalows?
Yeah, so thanks. Yeah, the term bungalow is just, I guess if you want to say it's a slang term, it's not something I don't believe you'll find in the zoning bylaw. So we call it a 1 or 1.5 story. In terms of the floor area, Mr. Mayor, if you don't mind allowing Dustin to answer that question, that would be great.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, so I can talk about main floor square footage. So if we look at lot number 4, the main floor is 1150 square feet.
Okay.
Okay, so lot 3, the main floor is 1073 square feet.
Okay.
And lot 2 mirrors that. So again, 1073 square feet.
Okay.
And lot number 1 is 920 square feet on the main floor. And you mentioned the bungalow loft. So the loft is approximately 614 square feet on lot 1, as well as lot 2 and 3. Lot number 4 at 644 square feet in the loft.
Okay. That's good. I just, you know, Deputy Mayor talked about good use of property and land, and certainly our town's official plan, you know, speaks to, you know, the need for rental housing, and this is, you know, addresses our intensification policy, that requirement, and I think there's a lot of good things about this. I just wonder in the backyard, Dustin, would you be, and our deputy mayor talked about this a little bit, maybe the fencing in between the properties, but were you talking about fencing? Maybe I misunderstood the deputy mayor's question, but would there be some buffering, some fencing rather, that would separate the backyard lot from the neighbors, or is there one now, or would you
There's
be
not one
thinking
there right now, but I do like your question. It's a good question. There will be a fence built to separate the property to the ones at the rear, and that's a necessity for sure. Yes,
I think that's something that's, you know, that's important for the residents in the area, that's for sure. Well, thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, further questions from members? I just had a comment to make. I think, you know, there's no question that, you know, the municipality is in need of rental housing. The applicants pointed out, several members of the committee have pointed out, some members of the public have pointed it out, and it's true. You know, and so, you know, what we're looking at here is an intensification where the applicant is asking for a fair amount of relief from the municipality in order to build, you know, a much more intensive type of development than we would normally approve, and or that we would normally have in that location. And the sort of the quid pro quo there is that we get rental housing, which has a broad community benefit. And so I guess my comment to the planner and to the applicant would be, as you work on this application and our plan to return to this committee and to council for final approval, I would very much like to see an application that removes the likelihood of freehold sale of these units and keeps them in the rental market. I mean, that's the quid pro quo we're making here. You know, we need maximum impact for these developments if we're going to approve them at this kind of density. And I think that so, you know, bring them to us in a way that's going to ensure they're going to stay rental units, so they keep serving that market. Because if they end up as severed freehold units, they're going to cost a lot of money, right? And that's the way it is. But we don't, you know, I don't know if we need to go that way. If we could keep them in the rental market, and that sounds like what you guys want to do anyway, and the markets you want to fill, boy, that would be a big win for the municipality, a big win, I think, for you. I think it would be a profitable business to be in, and certainly would have a lot of profit socially for our community. So, so that's my comment to something I'd like to see you spend a little more time on before you come back to the committee for a decision on this one.
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, Mike.
Just one quick comment, just to build on what you just said. And, you know, I've had, you know, as part of the Attainable Housing Task Force, and Jay and I are, you know, planning supervisor, have had lots of discussion about this, about, you know, rental units. The intentions are all well said and good at the outset, and then, as you say, they end up being sold and after 1 or 2 years and end up in hands of, you know, investors and so on and so forth. The price is high. And, you know, Jay and I have had discussions, you know, whether, you know, maybe it's a 5-year commitment or a 10-year commitment. I don't know whether we can do that or not, you know, to keep keep those in the hands of, the owner for rental units for a period of time, and then there, there's a release clause. I'm just throwing that out there as an idea, where it's 5, 10, 15 years, whatever it is. But, and again, I'm not sure we can even do that, but if we can, I think that's something, is worth looking at too. Because I agree with you, Mr. Mayor. This council is getting pretty serious about putting more housing stock out there for attainable affordable housing. And that's why, Dustin, I think it's good what you did. I don't know what the rentals are going to come in at. They're probably going to be, well, I'm guessing be market rent or above, no doubt. But there's a need to bring more housing stock of this nature, particularly for seniors too. They're looking for this type of housing. I was pleased to hear you've already got 3 on the wait list for those 4 units, which doesn't surprise me at all. So anyway, just a thought, just to build on what you were saying, Mr. Mayor.
I feel like, just having listened to Mr. Ernest, I think that he seems pretty serious about providing rental housing, and I have confidence that that's what he wants to do. So let's go back and work with the planner, and we can find an appropriate zoning maybe that would keep it in the rental market, or some other solution that would give council some certainty that it's going to stay in the rental market. I really think that's, I guess just speaking only for myself, that's something I would really like to see before we consider this. So I'm sure they'll work on that. If there's nothing else from members of the committee, then that brings us to the end of this public meeting. The committee won't be making a decision on this file this evening, obviously. We'll be considering it at a future committee meeting. And perhaps I saw Daniel come on there. Daniel, do you want to speak to us about next steps or something else?
Oh, sorry about that. I was just preparing for the next report.
Oh, wait, okay, never mind.
But yes, we'll take council's considerations and come up with something to that effect for the next meeting.
Would you just mention for anybody watching, Daniel, if they want more information on this file, how they can be informed as it makes its way through the decision-making process?
Absolutely. So the information's on the county's website, the county's planning department website, under Saugeen Shores development applications. And folks, if they're interested, can also write us by email, bcplpe@brucecounty.on.ca, and we'd be happy to respond.
Very good. Thanks for that, Daniel. All right, that brings us to the end of our first public meeting. Thank you, everyone. That moves on to our second one, 5.2, Z 2021-021, Ernest Properties Incorporated, 83 Victoria Street. And we'll start with the planner's report.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll just share my screen here. Bear with me. Okay, good. So this is another of Mr. Ernest's, another application by Mr. Ernest. As you noted, the address is 83 Victoria Street South in Southampton. And what's proposed is essentially to split the lot in half, demolish the existing house, which you can see there, and build a semi-detached structure, and split the lot in half along the common wall. So residential use, the use is currently residential. Surrounding uses are also residential. It's municipally serviced with water and sewer, and has year-round access on Victoria Street South. There's a picture of the rear of the existing house, and you can see it's a fairly deep lot. That picture was taken on close to the back property line. So there's a fair bit of room in the backyard. And here is the concept plan. I do apologize, it is kind of blurry, but you can see here that this is the common wall, and each parcel would be approximately 404 square meters in area. The proposal meets all the the requirements of the R2 zone. So essentially that's what's being asked here, is to rezone the property from R1, which it currently is, to R2 to allow a semi-detached structure. Currently, of note, semi-detached structures are not permitted in the R1 zone. And there you go. There's a bit of surrounding context. It's largely, as I mentioned, residential. And just high level, obviously the provincial policy statement encourages infill, as does the Bruce County official plan. I'll note the county has a policy that requires semi-detached structures and duplexes to be permitted in the same zone as single detached structures. Currently, that's not the case with Saugeen Shores zoning bylaw. However, as we'll see later tonight, there is a proposal to modify that, to bring that into conformity with the county official plan. I'll just sort of note it's unfortunate timing. Of course, I don't know if that housing amendment will be approved, but it's certainly moving us in the right direction to meet the town's goals of attainable housing. So in terms of the town's official plan, there are some provisions that have to be met for infill situations. This would be considered an infill situation. Availability of municipal services, adequate parking, compatibility with the neighborhood character, vegetation is maintained where possible. It's located near community services and neighborhood conveniences, and adequate buffering to minimize impacts. The proposal meets all the objectives of the Saugeen Shores official plan for infilling and the residential policy objectives. And likewise, as I said, the zoning is currently zoned R1. Rezoning it to R2, there's no special provisions being sought. It meets all the requirements of the R2 zone. The R2 will simply allow a semi-detached structure. There is an associated consent for a severance to split the lot in half once the structure is built. So the town provided comments requiring the applicant to hook up to town water and sewer, and 5% cash in lieu payment for parkland. Public Works requires an entrance permit, and the SVCA have found the application to be acceptable. No public comments were received on this application. And just to recap, it's a zoning bylaw amendment from R1 to R2 to allow a semi-detached structure. The recommendation is that the zoning bylaw be received for information tonight, and staff come back at a further time with another recommendation after hearing council's comments and public comments if there are any.
Okay. All right, thank you very much, Daniel. Then we'll turn it over to the applicant or his representative. I see Mr. Ernest there. Do you have any comments you'd like to make?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Luke. So this one here, again, to sever this and build a semi-detached dwelling, the intentions are to rent them, again, long-term. These units will be approximately 1,280 square feet on the main floor each. There will be full walkout basements and 9-foot ceilings. You can see also on the site plan, on the grading plan, that we have set the semi-detached dwelling further back than what the house is right now. So that will help out with parking. It'll actually give quite a bit of room in the driveway for parking. I would imagine 3 cars plus the garage. I should also note that to show how serious I am about these houses and multi-residential, I live right across the street from this one. So to rent these long-term, it will give me control as well. So if there's any further questions about them, please ask, and I'll answer to the best of my ability.
Okay, thank you. We'll turn it over then to any members of the public. I don't have any on my list, but I'll just clarify or confirm with the clerk that we don't have anyone else wishing to speak to this file.
That's correct, Mr. Mayor. There's no members of the public wishing to speak.
Okay, very good. Then we'll turn it over to questions or comments from members of the committee. The Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, Mr. Ernest. I think this is a great opportunity. Just north of where you plan to do this, we put in 4 townhouses across from the fire hall. It adds more rental units to our repertoire. I know there are a lot of young people, there's lots of people looking for rental units. My only concern, and you addressed one of the 2 concerns, was the parking, because there's not a lot of space, as you mentioned, from the road to the sidewalk and then the sidewalk into that residence at the moment. So by backing that off, that's good. My other major concern would be drainage, but I'm sure you'll work that out with the building department, because as you're up and going back, that's a large, deep lot, and we don't want to see any runoff affecting the people in the laneway behind you. So I look forward to seeing this one as well. Well done. Thank you.
Thank you. Vice Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to, commend Mr. Ernest Dustin for investing in our community, and I think it's a good use of land for infilling, and good luck with the lot drainage plan. I walked the property today, and I don't know whether it's a 10-foot drop to the back area, but I can see why the walkout basement's being proposed. So just want to commend you. It's good use of property and infilling. I think it's a good one. And I'm just wondering, just to generally maybe a little bit off topic, Mr. Mayor, but Mr. Ernest Dustin, have you, with any of your developments now or in the future, have you thought at all about secondary dwelling suites on any of your properties that you currently own, or that maybe you will own one day? The secondary dwelling suites do a whole lot for providing rental units and helping a family to pay down a mortgage, and so on. The province has said do it. And just a comment, just a question to you, if you thought about that at all.
Yeah, I haven't thought too much about it. I'm sure there's definitely a market for it in the area, and there's definitely a need for it. I haven't given it too much thought on this property here.
That's fine. Thanks for allowing me to ask that question, Mr. Mayor. It's a little bit off topic, but thank you.
Councilor Grace.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My first 2 questions are for Dan. I don't know if Dan can hear me.
There he is.
Okay, great. So Dan, can you tell us what was our percentage of new growth through intensification last year in 2020?
Yes, thanks. And through you, Mr. Mayor, the number, after confirming with Jay, is 3.5% of new development was characterized as intensification.
Okay, thank you. And I just, in your report you talk about, and you just mentioned a little bit earlier, but in your report you quote the county official plan, which says that local municipalities with official plans shall include policies requiring duplex semi-detached housing, meaning a building or structure with no more than 2 dwelling units, to be included in the same zone as a single detached dwelling, and that similar zoning provisions can apply to both types of dwelling units. And that, I don't know that it's in your report, but it's my understanding that the law says that all lower tier official plans and zoning bylaws must conform to upper tier official plans. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct. I'm not sure the history there. exactly how long this has existed, but there is usually a bit of a grace period to allow to bring those lower tier documents into conformity with the county official plan. Although I think this is a fairly long-standing policy. So again, I'm not sure what the history is there, but as we'll see later this evening, there is some changes proposed to the town's zoning bylaw through a housekeeping amendment that would address that particular policy.
Okay, thank you. And is just a follow-up on that, is this something that is specifically required by the province?
It's not explicitly required by the province. Of course, the province through the provincial policy statement highly encourages intensification and a mix of different housing types and densities, but it's not explicitly in the PPS that semi-detached and duplex structures exist in an R1 zone. It is common in other local municipalities. For instance, I know Kincardine permits semi-detached structures in the R1, and they seem to have a fair bit of uptake on that type of construction.
Okay, so I have two questions for, I guess, Dan or Dustin. In the application or in your presentation, it says that this would be for a semi-detached dwelling containing 2 units. Does that mean 2 dwellings containing 2 units or 1 semi-detached entire dwelling?
Yeah, I see what you're saying. No, what I'm proposing here is a semi-detached dwelling. So each one, as they are severed, each one is its own dwelling. So there'll be a total of 2 units.
Okay.
On the other lot that's there now.
And one more question, Mr. Mayor, if I may.
Yep.
Dustin, what do you see as the proposed height for this?
Proposed height. So what's there now? We had a picture of it earlier. Everybody got to see that. It won't be any higher than what's there now. It might even be slightly lower, to give that a bit of perspective, because there will be a full walkout basement in each of them with 9-foot ceilings. So that's huge. That's a really nice feature to have. So there'll be no second floor in it. It'll just be the main floor and then the ground level floor, the basement, if you will.
Thank you very much.
Just to clarify, no relief beyond the zoning changes being sought here, right? It's a move from R1 to R2, but the proposed development will meet all of the requirements of the R2 zone if the zoning amendment is made, correct?
That's correct, yes.
Yeah. Councillor Mayan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, did I notice a historical plaque on this building? Is it subject to the historical registry provisions?
Yeah, Jay.
Yeah, it's not subject to Heritage Act preservation. It's documentation through our Heritage Committee. It's sort of like a walking tour, I think, that's being developed. Perhaps those that are on Heritage Committee know more about that program.
Okay, so it's not on the registry. It's just a special interest.
We have a heritage plaque program through the Heritage Committee, and so it would have been plaqued, but that does not mean it is designated under the Heritage Act.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Are there other questions or comments from members of the committee? I don't see any. So Dan, would you just remind everyone again how they can get more information on this file or keep up with it through the decision-making process?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, the information is available on the Bruce County Planning Department website under development applications for Saugeen Shores, or individuals can email us at bcplpe@brucecounty.on.ca.
Great, thank you very much. All right, that brings us to the end of this public meeting, and thank you all very much. And that will come back to council at a future date for a decision. Okay, that moves on to 5.3, which is Z 2020-071, Tom Fenton for 77 Bruce Road 25. And we'll start with the planning presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just going to share my screen here once again. Okay, so this is a file with a bit of a history. It was first filed actually before I started with the county, I think in late 2017. So it has gone to a public meeting before, but because of the time that has lapsed between the first public meeting and now, we're bringing it back. So the application is for Mr. Fenton's property along County Road 25. And there's a picture of it. It's currently vacant. And it is surrounded by agricultural vacant land, institutional and residential uses. It's serviced by municipal water and sewer, or has access to sewer anyways, and has access to Bruce Road 25. And this is more specifically what's proposed. Mr. Fenton lives in this property here that says lot severed in March 2021, and he's proposing to create a fairly large residential lot next to it. And this, just for awareness, is the realigned proposed route for the realigned County Road 33. Has not been confirmed, but that's an approximation of where it may be. So, and here's more specifically what the property is intended to be used for. Here's County Road 25 at the top here. They're looking to build a house, Mr. Fenton and his partner, Kathy, and there's a special provision to this. So it'd be R1 special provision number 78, and that would be to allow a detached garage with a height of 7.9 meters. And here's the existing zoning. So the lot that was severed is an R1 lot. So they're looking to create another R1 lot right here, about 1.1 acres in size. It's currently zoned planned development. Now the planned development zone, the intent of that zone is largely to hold pieces, large chunks of land in a bit of a frozen state until they can be developed comprehensively, typically through a plan of subdivision or perhaps in other means. But the whole idea is this broader area would be planned rather than sort of piecemeal development. I will note that the county's land division committee approved the consent, so it's already been approved in March. So the proposed zoning is to largely catch up to the decision of the county's planning and development committee to create that 1.1 acre consent. Okay, so I'll quickly go through the policies. The PPS does encourage residential lots such as this one to be developed on full services. It's a primary urban community. It allows in the county official plan, which allows residential uses such as the one being proposed. And as I mentioned, the residential zoning is really to catch up with the consent file that was approved and to allow Mr. Fenton to construct a house on the property. He did have to undertake an archaeological study because of archaeological potential in 2017. And there's a few comments here from the town. Again, cash in lieu of for parkland, requirement to hook up to servicing. The proposal does not preclude the efficient use of the remnant lands. And maybe on that note, I'll go back up here, and I'll note that despite the rather large lot, 1.1 acres, there still remains quite a bit of land in the planned development zone to allow for the comprehensive development or planning of this broader area. The SVCA generally found the application acceptable. There is high seasonal groundwater, so those comments were passed on to the applicant. They're recommending an elevated structure to avoid problems with ground surface water. No objection from the historic Saugeen Métis and County Transportation Engineering. Just wanted to make a point that the application shouldn't be linked in any way to the realignment to Bruce Road 33. No public comments received. And just to recap, it's a rezoning from planned development to residential 1 with a special provision to allow a detached garage with a height of 7.9 meters. The consent severance has already been approved by the Land Division Committee at the council. Sorry, by County Planning Committee. And the recommendation is that the zoning be received for information. The Fentons have asked, however, for consideration for a decision tonight, and I'd be happy to make a recommendation to that effect after hearing comments from council, if council so chooses to consider making a decision on this tonight.
Sure, I think the most appropriate thing is to complete the process of the public meeting, and then we can decide whether that's something the committee wants to consider or not. So why don't we turn it over to the applicant? I see him there. Mr. Fenton, do you have any comments for us? We hear you there now.
Yes. I think the only questions I had is that you now have the correct name on the application for who's applying. Is that correct?
I believe we do, Dan.
Yes, there was an error on the bylaw schedule. It included Tom and Murray Fenton, I believe. So we've corrected the schedule to just have Tom Fenton.
That's excellent. I think my only other question is on your first application for the apartment building, you were discussing percentage of lot coverage. What is the percentage of lot coverage on this particular lot?
I believe the maximum permitted lot coverage is 35%.
Okay.
I would hazard
all I have.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Fenton. And I guess I'll just ask, I don't have anyone on my list here, but I'll just ask the clerk to confirm that we don't have any other members of the public wanting to speak to this.
That is correct, Mr. Mayor. There's no members of the public wishing to speak. Thanks.
Okay, then we'll open it up to members of the committee. We'll start with Councilor Mayette. And then we'll get the vice secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and congratulations, Tom. I'm glad this has finally come back 4 years later. I was in support of it back in 2017, and I'm in full support of it today. I think you're going to have a lovely spot to build a lovely home, a great garage, and I'm looking forward to seeing it. Just a question. It's going to be on water, but not sewer, right? We're going to septic bed, but there is town water on the road. Is that correct?
Sewers are getting installed, I believe, this year or possibly next year.
Okay, so it'll be
we're currently on town water.
On water, so
We'll just turn it over to
sewer's
Daniel
coming.
Briefly, he can give us the update on when that's going to happen.
Yeah, I'm not sure the exact date, but it's my understanding it's to happen this summer. I believe I see Amanda just popped up, so maybe she can clarify.
Yeah, Amanda?
That's correct. And the sanitary sewer will be connected in front of this lot this year. We're going to do all the way from Ridge Street to 21, so it's in.
Okay, carry on.
All right, and just
Yep, Dave, carry on. Sorry.
yeah, one more thing. if it's appropriate, I would like to make a motion that we make a decision on this file tonight.
Yeah, we can bring that around at the end. We'll certainly have that discussion at the end.
Okay.
Have that opportunity to do that, okay?
I stand so moved anyway.
Yep, good enough. Vice Deputy Mayor?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I certainly would second the motion of Councillor Mayette. I think it's unfortunate it took 4 years, Tom, but nevertheless, I think we shouldn't delay this any longer. And let's get this formally approved this evening. I think that would be a good thing to do. I did have one question about on page 3. There's a map there, and it talks about Ridge Street, and then on page the map shows the Ridge Street alignment there, and then on page 6 it talks about the proposed severed lot which shall not encumber the future southerly extension of Ridge Street. I just was a little confused by that that comment. Ridge Street southerly would have to go through the lot, through the severed lot, would it not? I just don't understand that comment there.
We'll turn it over to Jay to provide a clarification.
Yeah, no, perhaps my memory is hazy, but there was a time where I wasn't totally sure where Ridge Street was coming out, and now we've got better mapping from the county. So that's just a documentary record of the town's comments over the last few years on the file.
That's fine, Jay. I get it. I understand now. And because of Bruce Streets where okay, I got you now. Thanks. I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
We don't need a map anymore. Ridge Street is actually already there on the other side of the road. So we know pretty well exactly where it's going to come out, and it's not in front of this proposed lot or this already severed lot. Any further questions or comments from members of the committee? Let's make a comment. I was reading the Conservation Authority comment there, and they talk about flooding and raising up something of the driveway. I guess I am confused, and just clarify for me, Daniel, I guess like the authority's comments in that regard, recommendations on elevation stuff really are meaningless in this context, right? This isn't a regulated area and it has nothing to do with the zoning. So all that's going to be controlled by the building permit, right? It doesn't make, they don't have regulatory authority over the grading of the lot in this area, nor do they have influence, or nor does that comment impact the zoning, correct?
Yes, that is correct. It's not a regulated area. So you're correct. Yes, that is a suggestion I think that the SVC is making, that it's a known area for surface water runoff issues, but there's no requirement to obtain a development permit from the SVCA. So the development would be in accordance with the building permit process through the town.
I do wish that the authority would stick with its regulatory authority and stick to the topic when it's providing comments on these things. That's confusing and unnecessary. All right.
Mr. Mayor, do you want me to add a bit to that, just so you just for
no, that's.
information?
I think that's clear enough. We'll move on then to a decision on it. I think that it seems like there's no objection to us making a decision on this evening. So Daniel, I assume you have a recommendation that you can read for the committee to consider.
I do somewhat. I can make it up, I guess. The recommendation is that zoning bylaw amendment application Z-2021-071 for the lands described as Town Part Lot 30 Lake Range in the geographic township of Saugeen be approved.
Okay, I think that was moved by Councillor Mayette and seconded by the Vice Deputy Mayor. Am I correct about that, gentlemen? All right. Is there any discussion on that resolution? I don't see any, so all in favor? That's carried. Okay, so that has been, that matter has, we've had our public meeting, it's been decided. Do you have a comment, Vice Deputy Mayor?
I just wonder if we could take a 5-minute break, Mr. Mayor.
Oh, yeah, sure, you bet. We'll just wrap this up. So that concludes our public meeting and decision on this matter. Just for everyone's clarity, this will not be coming back to council again, or to this committee again. It will come back to council. It's a matter that's been decided. So with that, we will take a 5-minute break and we will reconvene at 8:10.
Thank you, everybody.
Yep, thank you.
Mr. Mayor, we have all the members back. You may commence the meeting again.
Okay, thank you, Linda. Then we will move on to our final public meeting of the evening, 5.4 Z 2020-044 by the Town of Saugeen Shores, and we'll begin with the planning report.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. There is no presentation for this one. It's largely text-based modifications to the zoning bylaw, but I will share my screen, the report, just so we can go over some of the text. And there is an associated schedule that we can have a look at as well. So, so this is a zoning bylaw amendment, really to address attainable and affordable housing in the town. It's probably can be considered an amendment that tackles some of the low-hanging fruit in the zoning bylaw and doesn't require changes to the local official plan or upper tier official plan. So these are provisions that committee can consider and approve without too much delay in the process if they see fit to do so. So again, so it's not entirely all-encompassing, but does address quite a few issues that we seem to encounter regularly. And these tweaks should help the town towards its goal of creating more attainable and affordable housing. So specifically, it deals with building height, yard encroachments for persons or structures associated with persons with disabilities, modifications to the secondary dwelling unit provisions, permitted uses associated and regulations associated in the residential first density or R1, R2, and R3 and R4 zones. And that's really the focus here. So let's just go through some of the main highlights. There's a introduction of a new schedule proposed to the zoning bylaw called a height overlay schedule. And this would allow, I'll just pull it up here. This would permit buildings to be up to 20 meters in height, which is equivalent to 6 stories. See if that does it any better. No. Okay, so here we are here, and it goes from the concession 10 and largely follows Godrich Street along that corridor to the southerly limit of the town. So along with the building height overlay, where stories up to 6 meters are permitted, there's a series of setbacks that would be relative to the height of the building. And I won't go into too many details here on the setbacks, but the main point is the setbacks are tiered so that each successively higher portion of the building maintains the required interior side yard setback. So for the secondary dwelling unit provisions, really the focus is on making these units easier to build. Right now they're permitted on lots with 520 square meters and have a frontage of 15 in addition to meeting the other setbacks. So the proposed amendment would modify these requirements to allow secondary units on more smaller lots, essentially. And the other noteworthy modification that's proposed is the removal of section 3.38H, which currently prohibits secondary dwelling units from being constructed within half a kilometer of the lakeshore. And for the R1 zone, proposed modifications include allowing semi-detached dwellings and duplexes in the R1 zone, reduction in the minimum lot area from 500 square meters to 450, and a frontage reduction of from 15 meters to 12 meters. And in the R3 zone, the provisions are modified to make it easier for townhomes to be developed, particularly the interior row housing or interior row dwelling units. And as we saw earlier in the evening, that 35% lot coverage is challenging to meet. So there's some provisions there. And finally, the provisions to yard encroachments would allow for structures associated with accessibility to encroach or have a 0 meter setback from any lot line, essentially. So that's a fairly high level review of the proposed amendment. I believe it has been provided in the agenda, the actual specifics of the amendment. And I'd be happy to take any questions. And also note Jay was really central in bringing this forward, and he's also available for questions.
Jay, do you have any comments that you want to make as the applicant in this case?
Well, applicant name, it is the corporation officially. But I appreciate Dan's summary, and he and I work closely. I think it's important, though, to characterize it as removing hurdles. We're not actively building affordable or attainable housing with this bylaw, but what we are doing is getting out of the way for those that have the means to go ahead and build. I'm particularly interested on the accessibility, for example, building a ramp or handrail, for example. There are still, yes, of course, it's easy to say now, there are provisions in our bylaw that might affect businesses or homeowners' ability to install those accessibility features without needing to go through a minor variance. I mean, that is, having to go through that process puts people off. There's a cost to it. There's a time. There's a risk. So removing those hurdles now for something like accessibility just are really easy. And I think it's one of the easiest steps we can take to make attainable housing a little closer. We've been using that as a step toward attainable housing, or this is a progression. So the second point is that this will probably be one of several steps, and I don't want to undersell it. This might be 10 or 12 steps process, and this being the first one. So I'll leave it there.
Okay, thank you. I guess I don't have any members of the public on my list. I'll just clarify with the clerk that there are no members of the public waiting to speak to this.
That is correct. There's no members of the public wishing to speak.
Okay, thank you. Then we'll turn it over to questions or comments from members of the committee. Councillor Carr, and then we'll get Councillor Maya.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor. I guess just a couple questions from that. I'm wondering where some of the proposed changes were pulled from. I guess firstly, the first one I'd like to ask about is about the 20 meters. I guess what was the old numbers? I guess we were 4 stories before. That's proposing 6. Is there a reason that we're looking at throwing that one into this? Is this changing maybe the level of service the town has to provide for certain services that we provide? Is there other, I guess, consequences to this one that we have to look at? Do we have the services? Like, can we provide all the services to a building? Obviously, you're looking at a high rise at 6 stories. I guess that's the first question is what was the old height and what was the reasoning to go to 6 stories here?
Yeah, the old height, there's two different ones. It depended on the zone. If you're in the residential R1 or R2, or some of the, I think highway commercial, it was only 10 meters. If you're in the R3 or R4, and I think even the commercial core, it was 12 meters. So you could do 4 stories potentially. 20 isn't just taken out of thin air. There's some history in Saugeen Shores, not that anything's been built at 6 stories, but through the design guidelines discussion 12 years ago, there was discussion of projects that may be a way of getting to 6 stories. There's a sense that we could build to that height and still respect the small town feel. 6 is certainly a common unit for some cost efficiencies with taller structures. I think the taller you get, the more cost efficient you get, but 6 is sort of the first level you can get at where an elevator has, at least I have to take some builders' words for it here, but 6 is really the first floor you can get sort of a cost efficiency on having elevator service to building. Anywhere lower than that, it's not a very viable option, or at least becomes a little cost prohibitive. And so consequently, we're not getting what we need. Now, we wanted to be cautious, so it wasn't just 20 meters, which is why you see the tiered framework to it, because we have design guidelines that also require separation from sensitive uses, but ensuring that they're not quite as stark. So it's not 6 stories and then all of a sudden down you're down to 2 stories. So tiering it sort of minimizes that visual impact, and sort of it's a vestibule to get to that height. 20 meters, I should have mentioned earlier, 20 meters is also the standard width of our roads in most of our small on our streets, and that, for planner ease, I think sort of street level development, 6 stories is fairly, I'll defer to other planners with more expertise in urban settlement, but that's sort of a standard as well. But that's sort of the history of it. Servicing issues. Yeah, we've had this conversation before, and it's specifically related to, I think it was the wind turbines many years ago. How do you fight a fire at the top of a wind turbine? Well, in some respects, you just let it burn out. When it comes to buildings that house people, we have 2 options. One, we have equipment, which our current equipment can get pretty high to get to that top floor, but we also have the building code, which requires it to be sprinklered and sort of automatic. Again, I'm not sure how the mechanics work, but those sort of provisions require, even in Toronto, they don't have a truck that can do 80-story buildings, but they have the sprinklered system. So those are some of our backups, I guess. When it comes to servicing, sanitary will definitely be an issue, but as with anything, I expect a lot of consolidation, and I actually don't think any particular project's going to be able to come in right off the bat and build to 6 stories, because they'll have to consolidate land. They have to go through site planning anyways. And that's our opportunity to make sure that the sanitary pipe is enlarged, or the storm pond is built, or if there are special provisions that need to be addressed to address site characteristics, again, through a variance, maybe just on those sort of tiered structures. But it allows a starting point for developers in the town to have a conversation, and the community, frankly, because they'll be involved just because they're neighbors.
Okay, no, that's good. I like hearing that comment was thrown in. The community will still have a say in this too, because I think that changes the skyline of our municipality by going an extra 2 stories. In my opinion, that changes a lot. I guess another question, if I can, Mr. Mayor, through you.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
The other setback that we were dimension that we were looking at changing, I think, was going from 520 square meters down to 450 square meters. Is that following PPS, or where does the 450 meters come from? I just asked because in an earlier meeting, if we're trying to streamline things and do all this, we just had one change to 423, I think it was, off the top of my head. But I'm just curious as to, is this a standard that we're following and just coming into compliance with, or?
Well, I guess to me, I don't want to overstate my philosophy, but I actually think we could it might be a step too far tonight, is have no minimum lot area requirement. There's nothing in the PPS that says you have to have a minimum lot area. There are community standards. My history and understanding using the zoning bylaw for the last several years, plus the previous versions in historical review, I'm not exactly sure where the lot area came from. They seem to be passed down from child to child. And I'm not sure if that's good planning, but it's what has happened. What it has meant is that it's an opportunity for the town to, through either the council or the committee of adjustment, review the impacts of particular projects on the circumstances in the area. Where we've gone from just a long way of saying reduced it the 20 or 50 square meters we have today is a review, and I'll defer to Dan, is that this is we've cautiously reduced that because in each circumstance those files have come in, there's been a clear indication that that smaller lot size still fits into the community. The houses can still be built in, compatibility with their surrounding neighborhood, and therefore, again, using that sort of cautious approach, allowing and removing those hurdles for those types of files that are on the edge. And of course, committee of justice is still there when you have 420. We want committee to look at it because maybe there is a community impact, but that needs to be evaluated so far on a case-by-case basis.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I think I had Councilor Mayette next.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Jay, a lot of this sounds good. I think creating opportunities through lessening of rigor in the planning processes and the regulations is always a good thing. I'm looking at the schedule, or I guess it's the map, really, and you've got that pink dotted out area. Is that intended to be where these regulations would apply, or is that strictly for the extra height, or is that or would all these new proposed regulations that we're looking at apply across the municipality? So say somebody wanted to build a 6-story building, they wouldn't have to be in that shaded area, would they?
Well, if they wanted the height is meant for that area. So if you wanted 6 stories tomorrow or a month from now, and if this is passed, then you'd have to be within that area. You could certainly apply for a change elsewhere in town, but what we're saying is that we're removing that hurdle in that corridor. All the other changes, Dana, perhaps I'm wrong, but all the other changes are applicable anywhere those zones are affected. So the accessibility anywhere in town, whether you're downtown,
Okay.
whether you're on a waterfront property, whether you're in, east of, or on the east end of High Street, they're meant to be applicable anywhere. Same with the R1, R2, anywhere there's an R1 or R2 zone.
Okay, so that brings me to my next question then, which is, was any consideration given to the southerly extent of that, where it goes below County Road 25 and the proximity to the airport? I'm not a pilot, but I know that taller buildings and airplanes don't get along.
Yes, consideration was given to that. We are proposing to retain the existing height restrictions. So if they're looking at tall buildings south of 25, they still have to comply with the normal height provisions. And if there is an overriding, we can clarify, Dan, maybe there needs to be a clause just to say that when it comes to proximity to the airport, the other height provisions prevail over the height overlay. Just trying to flip to that page now, but yeah, there's airport height restrictions already. So lands within a ½ kilometer, buildings can't exceed 10 meters and so on.
Okay, so the regulations for proximity to airport would trump the planning rules.
Well, they are planning rules in our own bylaw. We would just make it clear which one is applicable when you're within ½ kilometer of the runway, for example.
I see. Okay, very good. And other than that, I think there's a lot of good stuff in there. Thanks for bringing it forward.
Okay, thank you. Further comments from members? The Vice Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I like Councilor Matt's comment about lessening, regulations and restrictions and anything we can do to make it easier for our, developers to take a look at affordable attainable housing is a good thing. And, these changes to the bylaw being proposed, I'm sure there'll be some opposition to the changes, but I just think this is adding more tools to the toolkit, so to speak, in encouraging our developers to, invest in affordable attainable housing. And so I really, someone I think was referred to as low hanging fruit. I think some of it definitely is, maybe it can be tweaked a little bit, some of these changes, but, I think, we're talking about higher density, we're talking about, higher buildings, we're talking about, more appealable to to investors, developers, and again, I think anything we can do to strengthen our resources, strengthen our resources we have for developers for attainable housing, affordable housing is a good thing. And so I mean, I know we're not making a decision tonight, but when it comes back, I certainly in supportive of most of what I'm reading. And I just want to thank Jay and Daniel for for bringing this forward. Daniel, I know you've been listening, the county about how serious we are around this table to provide affordable attainable housing. It's not a quick fix. It's not easy. It's not going to be easy, but I think we just keep adding things to the toolkit to make it easier for developers. So I just think we're doing a good thing here as a municipality, and there will be some people maybe will have some questions, and that's a good thing to be. I guess it leads to the question, Jay and Daniel, will there be? I guess there's going to be opportunity. Will be on how many occasions, public meetings, opportunity for people to comment on this. When does all this happen again?
Through you, Mr. Chair, this is the public meeting. We did post notice in the Shoreline Beacon, I believe it was, and so we've met the statutory requirements in terms of posting, So
sorry, Dan. So after tonight, then seeing this public meeting, I guess then the next step is to come back with the formal report and recommendation and when approximately might that happen?
Yeah, that's correct. So we would come back. Typically, we come back the next planning committee meeting with a recommendation.
So as soon as June sometime then. And sorry, sure. Just one last point. Did we? Were there many, Jay, Daniel? Were there many comments? I missed that point. Were many comments sent in or not?
We did not receive any comments on this amendment, proposed amendment.
Okay.
Councilor Grace.
Thank you, Dan and Jay. About this last point about public comment, if we only posted it in the Shoreline Beacon, I don't think that's that may be meeting the minimum statutory requirements, but I really think that it would, for me, I would say we should have another opportunity for public commentary, and I think we should be doing more advertising. I think we should be putting this as an announcement on our Facebook page or our website or whatever, because I think you're going to get a lot of comments if people know it's out there. The Shoreline Beacon is one newspaper.
Yeah, just to be clear, we did Saugeen Times as well, and we will also report more fulsomely on how information was disseminated, because the Shoreline Beacon, I agree, would be the minimum. We've definitely taken an extra step to ensure the dialogue has been open for more than that. Though we have heard over the last year on many of the issues that Attainable Housing Task Force has spoken of, and they included all the matters that are in here, increasing density, removing hurdles in the zoning bylaws. So I'm not sure how much more I want to invite public comment and take more time for the small steps that are proposed here. Now, I'm not trying to overstep Dan's opinion. He's writing the planning report, and maybe there'll be some nuance here that I'm not able to express tonight, but that'd be my recommendation before this comes back, is that we don't need to do 2 or 3 more notices, but I'll take council's direction, of course.
I think we're probably going to get a bit of earned media here. It'll be a report, there'll likely be some press reports coming out of tonight's meeting. And as we advance toward this will come to council I guess it'll come to regular council, will it? Is that, now I'm losing track of the process. This will come, it will come directly to regular council, or will go to the committee of the whole? Linda?
Sorry, I think it comes to planning committee, which is still a committee of the whole. And then if it's recommended by planning committee, it'll go to council. It might be the 28th of June.
So I would say it'll come back to the planning committee in a month. There's opportunities to have delegations at that time, and then there'll be another opportunity for delegations at the regular council if we pass it from the planning committee. So we'll know by then. The media will report it, and we'll know how big the reaction is, and council can bear that in mind and decide what it wants to do next. But I think I think the process is the process. It's a fair process. It's good for every other application, and it should be good for this one. And lots of opportunity yet for people to comment, and hopefully they'll do that. We would like to have those comments. So no secret, it's a public process, and here we are. So are there other comments from members of the committee? I would just add that I think I would just say thank you for bringing these forward. I think this is very important. I understand we're going to be considering other low-hanging fruit style amendments at the county along this line coming up as well. And we're going to be making regulatory changes to accommodate affordable housing. Regulatory in terms of loosening some regulations in terms of adding some regulations to require affordable housing. And so this is just step one in a series of regulatory changes that are going to show that the municipality is serious in getting affordable housing built. And we will couple that up with actions that are incentives and other things. But I think, I have heard several times over the last number of years that height is a limiting factor to getting affordable housing built. If you can't build over 3 or 4 stories, you limit or you make it less affordable to build those buildings, and we get less of those buildings as a result. We get less rental units because we can't build them big enough to make them affordable or to make them profitable. And I hear this all the time. I heard it a little bit tonight that profit is used as a bit of a bad word, but these developments have to be profitable. They don't get built unless they're profitable. It just doesn't happen. So profit is not a bad word. We have to get it. We have to make sure that we can allow affordable housing to get built in a way that's profitable for the developer. We can do that. This is part of how we do it. We've got a provision that prevents secondary suites from getting built too close to the lakefront. I voted for that. I was there when we did that, and it was not a good thing to do. It was the wrong thing to do. We need to have secondary suites available. Secondary suites have to get built everywhere in the community because people need places to live, and that's one way we're going to get them places to live. So we have to do that. I think we have to allow them to be built everywhere in the community. Some of these other provisions just make it more possible to get some of those units built. And the signals we send are very important. If we send signals that on one hand we say we want more density, and more density means more affordability, but on the other hand we never approve more dense developments or have zoning bylaw restrictions that prevent anybody from intensifying. We heard tonight that our intensification target is 10% infill, and we're hitting 3.5%. We're 6.5% under our target. We have to get some intensification, not for fun, but because people can't live here if we don't, and those are important people. So this is critical stuff, and we have to move it forward. And some people might not like it writ large or in certain circumstances, but you can't have a community unless we can find places to build some of these smaller homes, these more affordable homes. And so these changes have to happen, and so hopefully they will. And hopefully I think we can have a good dialogue with people in our community so they understand why. I think it's the way that, for example, that staff has handled the height restrictions here, limiting them to this specifically targeted area in Port Elgin. I think that shows that we're listening. I know there's concerns. I've heard concerns from the Southampton Residents Association and others about height, and so we've avoided increasing height in areas that may be sensitive or where people might be concerned about that happening, and focusing it on the core commercial well, the highway commercial areas essentially and core commercial of Port Elgin, where it, largely undeveloped already, and where I think it will be more acceptable to go to 6 stories. This has been handled, I think, with some sensitivity to look at making sure that we understand those parts of our community where certain things might be more appropriate than others. But it still attempts to get something done where we can get these things built. So I'm hopeful that we can work with our friends in the community who may have concerns to calm those concerns and demonstrate that these are reasonable changes that will help make our community more affordable to live in and make our community better. Yeah, Councilor Grace.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I agree with what you've just said, but I also think that I don't see the harm in us sending out a press release on this particular topic. I don't think we should be relying just on a notice published in the Saugeen Times and the Shoreline Beacon. I think if we really want to encourage people to ask questions and become educated, then we need to spread the word a little more.
Yeah, and I don't, I'm certainly not, or I'm certainly happy to have more people know about this and to offer us comments on it. Why don't we, I think we can talk to our communication staff. I mean, we've heard your comment, and perhaps we can reach out to the media or put together something to make sure it's known in the community. Certainly we want it to be known. We'll make better decisions the more people who know about this. So let's take that away. And we're not going to be talking about this again for about a month. So there's lots of time to take some action on that. Okay. Is there any other comments or questions on this one? If not, that brings us to the end of this public meeting. Yeah, there's nothing else on our agenda. Sorry, I'm just trying to get back to my agenda. Yeah, there's nothing else on our agenda. So I do have a resolution that this planning committee meeting of May 17th, 2021 hereby adjourns at 8:43 p.m. Is there a mover and seconder? Moved by Mattson, seconded by Smith. All in favor? That's carried. We stand adjourned.